Laura had always been the kind of woman who kept everything under control. Her house was spotless, her schedule precise, her emotions carefully hidden behind a calm smile. To everyone around her, she seemed content. A woman in her late 30s, married to a successful architect, living in a quiet suburb just outside of Portland. But inside, things were not as they looked. Her marriage to Ethan had become a series of polite conversations and predictable routines. The warmth they once shared had slowly been replaced by silence that filled the spaces between them. Ethan was kind, dependable, and good-hearted. But lately, he'd become distant. He often came home late, too tired to talk, and too distracted to notice the small things Laura still did for him. Fresh flowers on the table, his favorite dinner, or the way she'd linger near the window just to hear his car pull into the driveway. The love was still there, but it was buried under years of exhaustion, unspoken resentment, and quiet disappointment. Then came Maya. Maya had been Laura's best friend since college. Bold, fearless, always the center of attention wherever she went. She was everything Laura used to be before she became cautious, before she started choosing comfort over risk. Maya lived in Seattle and worked as an event planner. Whenever she visited, the energy in Laura's home changed. She filled the rooms with laughter, stories, and an easy confidence that drew people in, including Ethan. At first, Laura didn't mind the way Ethan and Maya got along. It was natural they shared a sense of humor, and she liked that Ethan could relax around her friend. But recently, something had started to feel different. Laura noticed how Ethan seemed to look forward to Maya's visits, how his eyes lit up when she entered the room, or how he laughed a little too freely when she spoke. Maya, too, had begun to show a gentler side when Ethan was around, less playful, more thoughtful. Laura told herself she was imagining it, that it was just her own insecurity. But one evening, while cleaning up after dinner, she caught a moment, a fleeting glance between the two, that made her chest tighten. It wasn't inappropriate, but it was real. Something unspoken was there, something delicate and dangerous that night. Laura lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts spinning. She didn't want to accuse anyone. She didn't even know what she wanted to prove. She only knew that she felt invisible, like she had been watching her own life from the outside. The next morning, as she sipped her coffee, an idea took root in her mind. It was irrational, maybe even foolish, but she couldn't shake it. She would invite them both, Ethan and Maya, for dinner. The three of them together under one roof. She told herself it was just to clear the air, to remind herself that there was nothing to worry about. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She wanted to test her limits to see what her heart would do when faced with the truth. So she sent the text. "Dinner at our place this Friday. Just the three of us. It's been too long," Maya replied. First, an enthusiastic "I'm in. Can't wait," followed by a heart emoji. Ethan texted from work an hour later. "Sounds nice. Need me to bring anything?" Laura typed back, "Just yourself." Friday arrived faster than she expected. She spent the afternoon cooking roasted salmon, creamy potatoes, and a lemon pie that used to be Ethan's favorite. The house looked perfect, warm lights glowing softly against the evening sky. But inside, her stomach twisted with nerves. When Ethan came home, he looked surprised to see the effort she'd put in. "What's the occasion?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Nothing," Laura said lightly. "Just wanted a nice evening with the people I care about." He smiled, unaware of the storm building inside her. When Maya arrived, she swept in with her usual energy, bright red lipstick, laughter that seemed to fill the whole room. She hugged Laura tightly, complimented the house, then turned to Ethan with a grin. "Wow, still as handsome as ever, Ethan. You two never age." Laura forced a laugh. It was meant as a joke, but something about the easy familiarity in Maya's tone made her chest ache. Dinner began pleasantly enough. They talked about old college memories, vacations, and the small absurdities of everyday life. The conversation flowed effortlessly, but Laura couldn't stop noticing the small things, how Ethan leaned in when Maya spoke, how Maya brushed her hair back in that effortless way that always drew attention at one point. Maya told a story about an old college professor who once confused her and Laura's essays because they were both too perfect. They all laughed, but Laura's laughter faded when she noticed Ethan's gaze lingered on Maya just a moment too long. Maya caught it too. Laura could tell by the brief flicker of discomfort that crossed her friend's eyes. But then she smiled again, covering it up, as if nothing had happened. When they moved to the living room after dinner, the air felt heavier. Maya sat on the couch next to Ethan while Laura brought in coffee. She paused for just a second in the doorway, long enough to see Ethan laughing at something Maya whispered. The sight hit her like a small, quiet wave, not of anger, but of realization. She wasn't just testing them. She was testing herself as the night went on. The conversation turned more serious. Maya began talking about relationships, how people change, how sometimes love fades, but connection remains. Her tone was thoughtful, her gaze far away. "Do you think love can come back once it's gone?" she asked softly, almost to herself. Laura looked at her, then at Ethan. "Maybe," she said, "but it depends on whether both people still want it." The silence that followed was long, filled with things none of them said. When Maya finally stood to leave, she hugged Ethan first. Then Laura, her embrace lingered a little longer than usual, her voice low. "You're lucky, Laura. You have something most people only dream of." Laura smiled faintly, though her heart ached. "Do I?" Maya didn't answer. She just smiled again, that quiet, knowing smile, and walked out into the night. Ethan closed the door behind her. Turning back to Laura with a confused expression. "What was that about?" Laura shook her head. "I don't know." He reached out to touch her shoulder, but she stepped back, her voice calm. "It's late. Let's just go to bed." When he went upstairs, Laura stayed behind. She stood by the window, watching the taillights of Maya's car fade into the darkness. The room was silent now, but her thoughts were loud, replaying every look, every word, every laugh from the night. She had wanted to prove something to herself, but all she had done was open a door she didn't know how to close. She realized the danger wasn't in what Ethan or Maya might feel. It was in the emotions she had uncovered within herself, the jealousy, the longing, the quiet sense of being forgotten. For years, she had lived safely, predictably, avoiding the edges of her own feelings. But tonight, for the first time, she had stood on that edge, and it terrified her how easy it was to fall. As the clock ticked past midnight, she whispered to herself, "I just wanted to see what I could handle." But deep down, she already knew this was only the beginning. The days after that dinner passed slowly, but the silence in Laura's home felt louder than ever. Ethan went about his usual routine work, late nights at the office, quiet dinners where conversation barely stretched beyond "how was your day?" He didn't mention Maya, and neither did Laura still. The air between them felt tense, like they were both avoiding a topic too fragile to touch. Laura tried to convince herself that she was overthinking everything, that dinner had been harmless, that she was just tired and emotional. But her thoughts betrayed her. Every time her phone buzzed, she half expected it to be Maya. Every time Ethan smiled at something on his screen, she wondered who he was texting. She hated the feeling. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was uncertainty, the kind that ate away at trust in small, invisible ways. On Wednesday afternoon, as she was folding laundry, her phone rang. Maya's name flashed on the screen. Laura hesitated before answering. "Hey, stranger," Maya said, her voice bright as ever. "You disappeared after Friday. Everything okay?" Laura forced a laugh. "Yeah, just busy. That dinner was nice, though. We should do it again sometime." There was a pause on the line. "Yeah," Maya said softly. "It was. Different." Laura felt her throat tighten. "Different how?" "Just seeing you two together. You've built something steady, you know? It made me think. About what? About how people grow apart without meaning to." For a second, neither spoke. Then Maya changed the subject, asking about work and random things. But even after they hung up, the weight of her words stayed. That night, Laura couldn't focus on anything. She watched Ethan work at his desk, his face lit by the glow of his laptop. She wanted to ask him how he felt about Maya's visit, but every time she tried, her courage faded. Finally, she said, "You seem to enjoy having her around." He looked up, surprised. "Of course. She's your friend. It was fun." Laura studied his face. "Just fun." He frowned, closing the laptop. "What's this about, Laura?" She shook her head quickly. "Nothing. Forget it." He sighed, clearly tired. "If you're worried about something, just say it." But she couldn't, because how do you explain a feeling that doesn't have proof? How do you tell someone that their laughter with someone else made you feel invisible? Instead, she smiled tightly. "It's fine." "Really?" But it WASN single quotes, though, the next day, as Laura was grocery shopping. She ran into Maya. She looked effortlessly radiant, even in casual clothes. They hugged, and Maya said she'd just finished meeting a client nearby. "I was going to call you," Maya said. "Actually, can we grab coffee? I need to talk." Something in her tone made Laura uneasy, but she agreed. They went to a small cafe down the street. The smell of roasted beans filled the air, and sunlight spilled through the windows. Maya stirred her coffee slowly, her gaze thoughtful. "Laura, I don't want this to sound wrong, but have you been happy lately?" Laura froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean with Ethan, with your life." Laura gave a small laugh. "That's a big question." "I know," Maya said, smiling faintly. "It's just, when I saw you two together, it felt like you were there, but not really there. Like you've built this beautiful home, but forgot to live in it." The words stung more than Laura expected. She wanted to defend herself, to say her marriage was fine, but deep down, she knew there was truth in what Maya said. "I guess things have changed," Laura admitted quietly. "We've both been so busy just trying to keep things going." Maya nodded, her expression gentle. "That's normal. But don't lose yourself in it. You used to be so full of life. I miss that version of you." Laura looked down at her coffee, emotions swirling inside her. It felt strange hearing that from Maya, the woman who had always seemed so free. They talked for nearly 2 hours, laughing about old times, sharing thoughts they hadn't voiced in years. For the first time in a long while, Laura felt seen. Maya's warmth was easy to fall into. It reminded her of a part of herself she'd forgotten. As they walked to their cars afterward, Maya squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than you think, Laura. Don't let comfort become a cage." The words echoed long after Maya drove away. That evening, Ethan noticed something different in Laura. She was quieter, thoughtful. When he asked what was wrong, she only said, "I met Maya today." He paused. "Oh, how's she doing?" "She's fine," Laura replied. "She thinks we've changed." Ethan chuckled. "Well, people do. That's life." His casual response irritated her. "Do you ever think about how different things used to be?" she asked. He looked confused. "What's going on with you, Laura?" She shook her head, trying to hold back frustration. "Nothing. Sometimes I miss how we used to talk. How we used to laugh." Ethan softened. "We still can, you know. You just need to let me in again." The words were kind, but they felt incomplete, because she didn't know if she could let him in. At least not until she understood what she was feeling that night. She found herself scrolling through old photos on her phone, vacations, anniversaries, parties with friends. Her younger self smiled back at her, carefree and bright-eyed. Somewhere along the way, that light had dimmed. She didn't realize she'd been crying until she heard Ethan's footsteps behind her. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" Laura quickly wiped her face. "Yeah, just looking at old pictures." He sat beside her, glancing at the screen. "We used to take so many of those." "Yeah," she whispered. "We did." He smiled a little sadly. "We could do that again. Start over." For a brief second, hope flickered inside her. Maybe they could fix things. Maybe it wasn't too late, but then her phone buzzed a message from Maya. "Thinking of you tonight. You deserve to feel alive again." Laura's breath caught. It wasn't flirtatious. Not exactly. But it carried something deeper, something emotional, something that stirred what she'd tried to bury. She didn't reply, but she also didn't delete it. The following weekend, Ethan had to leave for a 2-day work conference. Laura told herself it would be good some space to think, to clear her head. But the silence of the house was unbearable. That evening, as rain pattered against the windows, her phone rang. Maya again. "Hey, I'm in town for a client meeting tomorrow," she said. "Thought I'd check on you." Laura hesitated. "Ethan's away." "I know," Maya said gently. "Then you shouldn't be alone. How about dinner?" Laura knew she should say no, that it would only complicate things. But something in Maya's voice, warm, understanding, broke through her hesitation. "Okay," she said softly. "Dinner sounds nice." When she hung up, her reflection stared back at her in the window, uncertain, restless. She didn't know what she was walking into, only that she was drawn to something she didn't fully understand. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts raced between guilt and curiosity, between what was right and what felt real. She didn't want to betray Ethan. She just wanted to feel something again. By morning, she convinced herself it was harmless, a simple dinner between friends. But deep down, she knew this wasn't about friendship anymore. It was about truth. As she got ready, choosing a dress she hadn't worn in years, she caught her own reflection and whispered, "Just dinner." But even she didn't believe it. When Maya arrived that evening, she looked effortlessly elegant, her smile warm and knowing. The rain had stopped. The air smelled like new beginnings and danger mixed together. Laura opened the door, heart pounding. "You came." Maya smiled softly. "Of course. I told you you shouldn't be alone tonight." And in that quiet moment, standing face to face, something unspoken passed between them. An understanding that whatever happened next would change everything. But Laura didn't step back. She only whispered, "Come in." And as the door closed behind them, she knew this wasn't about testing limits anymore. It was about discovering them. Laura stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure of what she was doing. Maya stepped inside, carrying a calm confidence that always seemed to fill any room she entered. She hung her coat by the door and smiled. That familiar, gentle smile that could disarm anyone. "You look beautiful," Maya said softly. Laura felt a rush of warmth, quickly brushing it away. "It's just an old dress," she replied, forcing a laugh. They settled in the living room. The rain outside had stopped, leaving behind a quiet hum of dripping water from the trees. Laura poured tea, though her hands trembled slightly. Maya noticed, but said nothing. Instead, she sat close, her eyes studying Laura as though she could see the storm behind her calm face. For a while, they spoke about small things, work, travel, memories from years ago. But underneath every word was tension neither of them dared to name. It wasn't romantic tension in the usual sense, it was emotional, raw, filled with years of things left unsaid. After a pause, Maya spoke. "Do you ever feel like you became someone you never planned to be?" Laura looked down at her cup. "Every day." Maya nodded slowly. "I used to look at you and think you had everything figured out. The house, the marriage, the calm life. But now I see the cracks. And it makes you human again." Laura smiled faintly, sadness in her eyes. "You always saw more than most people did." Maya's tone softened. "Maybe that's why I came back. I missed that version of Usta, one that used to talk about dreams instead of bills." Laura felt her throat tighten. She hadn't realized until that moment how lonely she had been. Maya's words touched something fragile inside Hertha, part that had long stopped believing in magic or possibility. "Maya," Laura began, her voice trembling. "Why are you really here?" Maya looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because you matter to me. And because I think you're living behind walls you didn't build alone." The honesty in her tone pierced through Laura's defenses. For a second she wanted to cry, to admit everything, to say she was scared, tired, and unsure of who she was anymore. But she couldn't. Years of composure wouldn't let her. Instead, she whispered, "I don't know what to do anymore." Maya reached over, touching her hand gently. Start by being honest with yourself. The touch was simple, comforting, and yet it sent a wave of emotion through Laura. She didn't pull away. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, her eyes glistening. Then Maya stood, walking toward the window. "You don't have to keep pretending everything's perfect," she said softly. "You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to feel lost." Laura looked at her friend's reflection in the glass, her own heart heavy with unspoken words. What if wanting more ruins everything? Then maybe everything wasn't as solid as you thought. Maya replied quietly. The words hit Laura hard. She looked around the room, the polished furniture, the framed photos, the well-arranged flowers, all symbols of a life she had worked so hard to maintain. But for the first time, she wondered if it had all been built for appearance rather than peace. When Maya turned back, Laura's face had softened. "I'm scared," she admitted. Maya walked closer. "Everyone is. But you don't have to face it alone." For a moment, their eyes met, filled with years of shared history, affection, and understanding. Laura realized that what she felt wasn't attraction. It was connection. A deep reminder of what real care felt like. She stepped back slightly and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me who I was." Kami smiled, her voice calm. "You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that makes them comfortable." They stood in silence, two women confronting their truths. Then, without another word, Maya said she should leave. Laura walked her to the door. Before stepping out, Maya turned and said softly, "Whatever happens next, promise me you'll start living for yourself." Laura nodded, her eyes damp. "I will." When the door closed, the silence of the house returned, but it felt different this time. Not heavy, not lonely, just still. Laura stood for a long moment, thinking about everything Maya had said. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the sound of rain starting again outside. For the first time in years, she didn't feel numb. She felt everything's fear, hope, confusion, freedom. It was overwhelming, but real. The next morning, she made herself a strong cup of coffee and sat by the window. The city outside looked washed clean after the rain. She thought about Ethan, about the years they'd spent building their life. There had been love, laughter, sacrifices. But somewhere along the way, they had stopped seeing each other. She knew she couldn't blame him entirely. They both had let distance settle between them. When Ethan came home that evening, Laura greeted him with a quiet smile. He looked tired, but he smiled back. "Missed me?" He teased gently. "Yeah," she said softly. "I did." They sat down for dinner, and for the first time in a long time, she asked him about his day and really listened. He seemed surprised, then relieved. Slowly, conversation flowed. They laughed a little awkward at first, but genuine. After dinner, Laura took a deep breath. "Ethan," she began, "I think we've both been pretending that everything's fine when it isn't, and I don't want to do that anymore." Ethan's expression grew serious. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to be honest. With each other. I've been unhappy. Lost, maybe. But I want to find my way back. Not just to you two, myself." He looked down, processing her words. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," she said gently. "We both stopped trying. We forgot how to talk, how to care in the little ways. I don't want to give up. But I also don't want to keep pretending." For a long time, Ethan said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. "I know. I've felt it too. I just didn't know how to fix it." "Maybe we don't fix it overnight," Laura said softly. "Maybe we start small." He smiled faintly. "I'd like that." That night they sat together on the couch, not saying much. The silence between them felt softer now, like the beginning of something rather than the end, later. When Ethan had gone to bed, Laura stood by the window again, looking at the rain. She thought about Maya, her words, her strength, her honesty. There was no resentment, no confusion, only gratitude. Maya had not come to break her world apart. She had come to wake her up. Laura sent her a message, "Thank you for reminding me to feel again." Maya replied almost instantly, "Always." Don't lose that spark. Laura smiled and set her phone down. For the first time in years, she felt peace, not because everything was perfect, but because she was finally being truthful with herself in the weeks that followed. Laura and Ethan started making small changes. They cooked together, went for walks, talked about things they'd long ignored. Some days were awkward. Others were beautiful. Healing wasn't easy. But it was real, and though Maya remained a quiet presence in her life, sometimes through short texts, sometimes through memories, Laura knew her journey had shifted. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Not because of betrayal, but because of awakening. One evening, as she watched the sunset from her porch, Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Yes," she said, smiling faintly. "For the first time in a long time. I really am." He kissed her forehead gently, and together they watched the sky turn from gold to violet. Laura knew there were still things to face, truths to speak, feelings to mend, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She understood now that love wasn't about perfection or safety. It was about honesty, about showing up even when things felt uncertain. And in that quiet moment, she felt gratitude for the rain, for the silence, and for the friend who had reminded her that sometimes the most important love story is the one you have with yourself. Claire sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the pale light slipping through the curtains. Her house was quiet, too quiet. 15 years of marriage, and silence had become their routine language. Daniel was in his home office downstairs, like always, working late on his laptop. Even when he was home, it felt like he wasn't really there. There was a time when his laughter filled every room. He used to leave her little notes on the fridge, bring her coffee in bed, and talk about their dreams. But somewhere between bills, deadlines, and aging days, all that warmth had thinned. Now, their conversations circled around grocery lists and tax deadlines. Claire wasn't angry, just tired of being invisible. She was still the same woman he fell in love with. Kind, gentle, loyal. But she felt like a photograph fading in the background of his busy life. And though she told herself this was what marriage became after years together, deep down she still longed to be seen again. That afternoon at her flower shop, she arranged a bouquet of lilies, Daniel's favorite. The smell reminded her of when they first dated, when everything between them was new and effortless. The bell above the door jingled and Olivia stepped in. Olivia was her oldest friend, a woman who carried energy like sunlight. She was single, confident, always smiling, the kind of person who made every room brighter. They'd met in college, drifted apart, and found each other again after Claire opened her flower shop. Olivia leaned on the counter. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she teased. Claire smiled weakly. "Maybe I haven't. Daniel's birthday is next week, and I want it to be special. But honestly, I don't even know what would make him happy anymore." Olivia frowned. "He's been distant, hasn't he?" Claire nodded, her voice soft. "We barely talk these days." "He's kind, but it feels like we live beside each other, not together. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a shadow." There was a moment of silence before Olivia said, "Maybe he just forgot how to see you. Men get stuck in their heads. They forget the woman they have right in front of them." Claire chuckled sadly. "And how do I remind him?" Olivia grinned. "Do something unexpected. Shake him a little. Show him something he didn't know he needed." The words lingered. Something unexpected. That night, as Claire lay beside Daniel, his soft snores breaking the silence, her mind replayed Olivia's advice. She didn't want to test him, but she wanted to wake him up, remind him of love, emotion, passion. Anything that made them feel alive again. A strange idea formed, something she couldn't explain, even to herself. She thought of giving Daniel a different kind of gift. Not material, not ordinary, something emotional. Something that would make him see her again. The next morning, she called Olivia. "I want your help," she said. "For Daniel's birthday." "Of course," Olivia replied. "What do you have in mind?" Claire hesitated. "I want you to spend time with him. Make him laugh, talk to him, get him to open up. I'll be there too, but In the background, I just want to watch him come alive again. There was a long pause. Claire, Olivia said gently, are you sure about this? I know how it sounds, Claire cut in. I just need to know if there's anything left between us. If he can still feel something, maybe if he remembers what it's like to connect again. He'll come back to me, Olivia reluctantly agreed. She didn't like the plan, but she loved Claire enough to go along. The following week, Claire planned a quiet birthday dinner. She invited only a few close friends, but secretly, she centered the evening around Olivia and Daniel's interaction. She wanted to observe, not interfere. On the day of the party, Claire decorated their dining room with soft lights and candles. The table looked beautiful, neat, warm, inviting. She wore a soft cream dress Daniel had bought her years ago, but never noticed any more. When Daniel came home, he looked surprised. You did all this? He asked, his face lighting up. Of course, Claire said. Happy birthday. He hugged her briefly before being distracted by the sight of Olivia. You made it, he said, smiling. Olivia grinned. I wouldn't miss it. I helped Claire with a few things. Throughout the evening, the three of them talked and laughed. At first, Claire felt happy watching Daniel relax for the first time in months. He laughed more in 1 hour than he had all year. But as time passed, a strange heaviness grew inside her. She noticed how Daniel's eyes followed Olivia's energy, how he smiled differently, freely, without the guarded look he often gave Claire. It wasn't romantic, but it was attention. Attention that used to belong to her. Claire stayed quiet, trying to convince herself this was what she wanted to see him happy again. But it hurt more than she expected. After dinner, Daniel helped Olivia carry dishes to the kitchen. Claire stood in the hallway, watching them through the doorway. The light from the chandelier fell softly across their faces. They were talking easily, their laughter low and familiar. For a moment, Claire saw what had been missing from her marriage. When Olivia left later that night, Daniel hugged her goodbye. It was friendly, nothing more. But to Claire, it felt like a mirror reflecting everything she had lost. As Daniel turned back toward her, she forced a smile. Did you have a good time? The best, he said. It's been so long since I laughed like that. Olivia's great. She's easy to talk to. I'm glad, Claire said, her voice calm though her heart ached. That night, she lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. Her plan had worked. He was happier, lighter. But the happiness wasn't because of her. It came from someone else. She thought about all the moments they'd lost. Dinners eaten in silence. Weekends spent apart. Love fading in the quiet. And now, another woman, her friend, had managed to bring out what she'd been begging for silently for years. She didn't hate Olivia. She hated herself for needing her. The next morning, Daniel left early for work. When he was gone, Claire stood by the window, staring at the empty driveway. She felt like she had opened a door she couldn't close. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Olivia. He's a good man, Claire. He just seems lonely. Don't lose him now. Claire typed back. I don't plan to. But I think I already did. That day, as she worked in her flower shop, her hands trembled while arranging roses. Every petal reminded her of love, fragile, soft, and so easy to bruise. That evening, when Daniel came home, he mentioned Olivia again, how nice it was to talk to someone outside of work, someone who listened without judging. Claire smiled politely, her throat tight. She knew then that she had made a terrible mistake. What she thought was a harmless experiment had become something more dangerous, a test of emotions she couldn't control. That night, as Daniel drifted to sleep beside her, she whispered into the dark. I gave you another woman, Daniel, but maybe I gave away something I'll never get back. And though he didn't hear her, the truth hung heavy between them, unseen but alive. The following days felt like walking through a fog. Claire woke up early each morning, made breakfast, and watched Daniel rush out the door with a cup of coffee in his hand. He seemed lighter, more talkative, more alive, but that new energy wasn't coming from her. He had started texting Olivia. Claire noticed it when he left his phone on the counter while stepping into the shower. She didn't mean to look, but when the screen lit up, her heart almost stopped. It wasn't anything inappropriate, just casual messages about a podcast, a funny meme, a joke about work, but it still burned. When he came downstairs, towel around his neck, she forced a smile. "You've seemed happy lately," she said. He looked up, surprised. "Yeah, I guess I am. Work's been good, and it's nice to talk to someone outside of the usual routine, you know? Olivia's easy to talk to. She understands things without making me feel judged." Claire nodded, pretending to understand, though her stomach twisted. She wanted to scream that she had been the one listening for 15 years. She had been the one who cared when he broke down from stress, when he couldn't sleep, when he lost his father. But somehow, he only noticed warmth when it came from someone new. That night, she sat in her flower shop after closing time, lights dimmed, staring at a bouquet of red tulips. Tulips had always meant forgiveness. She wondered who should be asking for it, Daniel, Olivia, or herself. Olivia called her that evening. "Claire, can we talk?" Claire hesitated but answered. "Of course, I feel like things are getting strange. Daniel's been messaging me a lot. It's innocent, but I don't want you to think I'm crossing a line." Claire's voice was calm, almost too calm. "You're not. I asked you to help him open up." "Maybe it's working," Olivia sighed. "It's working too well, maybe?" "He's lonely, Claire. He keeps talking about how he misses connection, not just with you, but with himself. I think you both need to talk honestly." Claire closed her eyes. "I don't even know how anymore." "Start simple," Olivia said. "Tell him what you miss. Tell him what hurts. Don't wait until it's too late." But Claire didn't. She couldn't. Every time she tried to talk to Daniel, the words stuck. He wasn't unkind, just distant, like someone living behind a glass wall. A week later, Olivia stopped by the house to return a book Daniel had lent her. Claire opened the door, smiling faintly. "Hey," Olivia said. "I thought I'd drop this off before I forget." Daniel appeared behind Claire, his expression lighting up in surprise. "Olivia, you didn't have to come all the way here. I was in the neighborhood," she said, stepping inside. They talked for a few minutes, casual, friendly. But Claire felt invisible again, standing there like an observer in her own marriage. She excused herself to the kitchen under the pretense of making tea. From there she could hear their laughter, soft, effortless, natural. When she returned, Olivia was sitting on the couch, and Daniel was showing her something on his laptop. The scene looked harmless, yet it sliced through Claire's chest. After Olivia left, Daniel turned to Claire. "You don't mind me being friends with her, do you? She's good company. It's nice to have someone who understands things." Claire's voice cracked slightly. "And I don't." He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "You do, of course you do, but it's different. You've been, I don't know, distant too." Her eyes filled with tears. "Maybe I became distant because I felt invisible, Daniel. Because every time I tried to reach you, you were somewhere else in your work, in your thoughts, anywhere but with me." He looked down, guilt flickering across his face. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way." "No," she said softly, "but meaning and doing are different things." That night, they didn't argue. They just sat in silence, side by side, yet oceans apart. Days passed, and Claire decided to take Olivia's advice, to speak her heart, even if it hurt. So she planned a quiet dinner for just the two of them. Candles, soft music, a homemade meal, the kind of evening they hadn't shared in years. Daniel came home late. He looked surprised to see the table set, the candles glowing. "This looks nice," he said. "I thought we could have dinner. Just us." He smiled and sat down. They ate quietly at first, then slowly conversation began to flow. Claire talked about her shop, her dreams of expanding it, her worries about them drifting apart. Then she asked, "Do you still love me, Daniel?" He looked stunned. "Of course I do." "Then why does it feel like you don't see me anymore?" He sighed. "I don't know, Claire. Life happened. Work happened. I guess I lost sight of what we had. But it's not because I stopped caring." "Then fight for it," she whispered. "Fight for us." There was silence. He reached across the table, touching her hand gently. It wasn't passionate, but it was real. I want to, he said. I just don't know where to start. Start here, she replied. For the first time in months, they looked at each other, really looked. The walls between them began to thin, even if only slightly. But rebuilding wasn't that simple. 2 days later, Claire found out Daniel had met Olivia for coffee. He mentioned it casually, not realizing how it would sound. She wanted to talk about you, he said. She's worried about how distant we've been. Claire's heart pounded. You talked about me. Yeah, she said you've been struggling. I didn't realize it was that bad. Claire's voice trembled. You didn't realize because you weren't looking. That night, when Daniel went to bed, she sat by the window, tears blurring her view of the city lights. She wasn't angry at Olivia, she was angry at fate. She had asked her friend to help her husband remember love. And now she was the one being forgotten. Still, Olivia didn't want to hurt her. The next morning, she showed up at the flower shop. Claire, she said gently, I think I need to step back. He's growing too comfortable with me, and I don't want to be the reason you two fall apart. Claire's eyes softened. You're not the reason. I am. I brought you into this. I wanted to wake him up. I just didn't think he'd wake up and look away from me. Then take him back, Olivia said. Before he forgets where home is. Claire nodded. That weekend, Daniel came home early from work. She decided to face things head on. Daniel, she said, standing in the kitchen, I want to tell you something. When I asked Olivia to spend time with you, I did it because I was desperate. I wanted you to remember how to feel again. I wanted to see if there was anything left in you that could still love. I thought if you could connect with someone, maybe you'd remember how to connect with me. He looked stunned. You asked her to? Yes, but it got out of control. I thought I was helping us. Instead, I made it worse. He was silent for a long moment. Then he whispered, Claire, I don't even know what to say. Say that you still want to try, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. I do, but I also need to figure out why I stopped trying in the first place. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt heavy with everything they hadn't said over the years. That night, Daniel didn't sleep in his office. He stayed beside her. They didn't touch, but they lay quietly, their hearts beating to the same painful rhythm. And for the first time in a long time, Claire felt something fragile but real. She knew they weren't fixed. But maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to see each other again, still. One thought haunted her. Had she already crossed a line that could never be uncrossed? The night Sarah realized what she had done, she couldn't sleep. The sound of the rain outside was steady, almost like a quiet reminder of everything she'd set in motion. She sat in the living room, staring at the empty couch where Michael used to sit reading his late-night news on his tablet. That space felt colder now. Everything around her was quiet, except her mind. It was racing, tangled in guilt and questions she couldn't silence. It had been weeks since Sarah introduced her husband Michael to Claire. The woman she once believed would help save their marriage. Sarah thought bringing someone new into their circle might shake things up, might remind Michael what he stood to lose, but it hadn't gone that way. What started as an idea born from frustration and loneliness had turned into something she couldn't control. Michael had changed. He was more distant now, but also happier. His eyes lit up when Claire's name was mentioned, and it broke Sarah's heart every single time. She had wanted to test his loyalty, not lose it. One evening, Michael told her he was going out for a short walk. He didn't realize Sarah had seen Claire's car parked 2 streets away earlier that day. That night, Sarah followed him, not out of anger, but out of desperation for the truth she already knew. When she saw them together, talking quietly, under the dim streetlight, she didn't see passion or betrayal. She saw sadness. Michael wasn't laughing or smiling. He looked lost, unsure. Claire touched his hand gently, and for a moment, Sarah thought she might scream. But she didn't. Instead, she walked away quietly, tears falling down her face as she realized what her choices had done. The next morning, she sat in the kitchen, her coffee untouched, waiting for Michael to come home. When he finally did, his expression was full of confusion and guilt. He didn't need to say anything. She already knew. I saw you, Sarah said softly, her voice calm but shaking slightly. Michael's face fell. Sarah, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I know, she replied. Neither did I. There was a long silence. Both of them were standing in the ruins of a marriage that had been built on years of love. Laughter and shared dreams, but also quiet disappointments and unspoken words. Sarah finally broke the silence. Do you love her? Michael hesitated. I don't know. It's not that simple. Claire made me feel seen again. But I never stopped caring for you, Sarah. Sarah nodded slowly. Maybe that's the problem. We stopped seeing each other long before she came along. Her words hung in the air like heavy fog. Michael sat down across from her, his hands shaking slightly. What do we do now? I don't know, she whispered. But I think we both need to stop pretending this can be fixed by adding someone else to the picture. Maybe we need to face ourselves. Days passed in silence after that conversation. Sarah found herself walking through the house, remembering small things, the way Michael used to bring her coffee just the way she liked it, the way they used to laugh at old movies, how his hand felt when he reached for hers in the middle of the night. Those memories felt like ghosts, now familiar but distant. One afternoon, Sarah received a call from Claire. The sound of her voice was soft, almost apologetic. Sarah, I didn't mean to hurt you. Michael told me everything. Stepping away. This isn't right. Sarah felt an odd mix of relief and sadness. Thank you, she said simply. After hanging up, she sat on the porch for a long time, looking out at the fading autumn light. That evening, Michael joined her outside. Didn't speak at first, they just sat there. The quiet between them, finally peaceful instead of tense. I talked to Claire, he finally said. I know, Sarah replied. She told me she's leaving town. Michael nodded, staring at the trees in the distance. I'm sorry, Sarah, I don't even know how to begin fixing this. Maybe, she said softly, we don't fix it. Maybe we rebuild. Michael looked at her, unsure what she meant. Rebuild, yes, Sarah said. Not from where we were, that's gone, but from where we are now. It's people who made mistakes, who hurt each other, but who still care. Michael exhaled, his shoulders sinking with a mix of relief and regret. You'd really want to try again. Sarah smiled faintly. Trying doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning. We lost each other somewhere along the way, Michael. But maybe this is our chance to find our way back, if we still want to. For the first time in months, he reached for her hand. It felt uncertain, awkward even, but it was real. In the weeks that followed, they began small. They went for walks together again, sometimes without speaking much, sometimes talking for hours. They shared coffee in the mornings, cooked dinner side by side. Slowly, gently, they started remembering what it meant to be a team. One Sunday morning, Sarah looked at him across the table and said, I think we both learned something we should never forget. What's that? I asked. That love isn't about control or tests. It's about choice. Every day you choose the person you stand beside, even when it's hard. Michael nodded, his eyes soft. And I choose you, Sarah, I always will. Her heart swelled, not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because it was honest. There was no illusion now, no fantasy, just two flawed people finding their way back to truth. Months later, as they watched the sunset from their porch, Sarah thought back to that dark night when everything seemed lost. She realized that sometimes pain breaks you open only to let light in. The mistake she made, giving him another woman, had forced both of them to confront what they'd been avoiding for years. Their own emptiness and longing for connection. She didn't forgive herself easily, but she learned. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about understanding, patience, and courage. And though she would never forget what happened, she no longer wanted to erase it either. It was part of their story, a painful chapter that led them back to each other. As the evening air grew cool, Michael placed his arm around her. You know, he said quietly, I still can't believe you didn't give up on me. Sarah smiled faintly. I almost did. But then I remembered who we were before all the noise, and I realized I still wanted to know that man again. He looked at her, eyes glistening. And what about the woman I lost? Sarah chuckled softly. She's still here, just a little wiser now. They both laughed softly, genuinely. The sound was simple, but full of meaning. That night, Sarah finally slept peacefully. For the first time in a long time, her heart wasn't heavy. It wasn't because everything was fixed, but because she had finally found peace in the truth. That real love isn't about giving someone else to your partner, but about giving yourself another chance to love again. And as she drifted to sleep, she whispered quietly to herself, sometimes. The hardest way to learn what love really means is to almost lose it.